I want to start by talking about the dire situation in Somalia and East Africa. Drought, high food prices, and conflict have led to total famine in many parts of the region there. And the United Nations today held an emergency meeting in Rome to address the issue. Now, there are a few issues here. The UN World Food Program has said it's really difficult and in many cases unable to reach more than 2 million Somalis at risk of starvation because they're in areas controlled by the militant group Al-Shabaab. Now, in other ways, people there are being forgotten. The United States used to be the top aid provider for Somalia and now ranks 7th. Charity Tooze is the Senior Communication Officer for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Charity, I want to talk about this situation in Somalia. I guess I just want to start by having you give us an overview, some bullet points of what people should know about the situation there.
Okay, so it's been about 6 seasons of drought in the southern and central area of Somalia, which has led to a particular tipping point that we're seeing now. Some of the violence after the first of the year increased a lack of access to some of the areas that you referenced earlier. And so because there hasn't been a lot of access to the area, thousands and hundreds of thousands of people have been fleeing and walking for 3 to 4 weeks at a time to get to 2 different camps in Kenya and Ethiopia. So we're looking at a volume of 3,000 people every day registering at these camps. And the numbers increased threefold from May to June, and they just keep increasing. Wow. So as this has gotten some international and domestic attention, there is a greater movement inside of Somalia to get more aid, but as you know, there are areas that it is difficult.
Charity, I mean, why in 2011, with technology the way it is, with travel the way it is, there are a lot of places in this country where people have more than enough. Why does suffering still go on like this, to this level, today?
You know, whenever there's conflict, there's food security issues, and the two really go hand in hand. If you look at the history of Somalia, this situation has been going on for over 20 years. The UN peacekeepers were removed from the region in the mid-90s, and that led to increased instability. And so you have a very weak government, you have a desert, and not necessarily a priority by a lot of the world leaders, and so you have a weak state, and it's a difficult question to answer.
You mentioned a little earlier that there is some attention being brought to this, but I would say for the most part, this is a story that is not making the lead on any sort of newscast in America. This is not being paid attention to. I mean, certainly the situation in Norway that happened over the weekend, very tragic and horrible. But the numbers of the people that were killed there pale in comparison to the number of people dying every day in Somalia. So why is it that we're not looking at this with a serious eye and giving it some serious attention?
I think that in many ways foreign policy has not focused on this area of the world. And as a humanitarian and a humanitarian representing a humanitarian agency, we're not a political institution, so I can't give you the deeper gist into that would be inappropriate. But the situation that they are facing now has been something that has just steamrolled into this. And I think that we have to pay attention. Hundreds of mothers are losing 3 or 4 children on their way to Ethiopia.
Any explanation for the drop in aid by the U.S.?
The U.S. has been one of the biggest aid contributors to Kenya and Ethiopia and Djibouti and Yemen. Our humanitarian assistance from the U.S. has not went down. Inside of Somalia, many countries have withdrawn aid because of the security situation, and
it's
that's
just
happened.
Not safe anymore.
Well, you want to know where your money's going. There's the whole guns and butter issue, and these outreach efforts need to be met with accountability, and it's been problematic in that area, and so
we're almost out of time.
Yes.
Solutions? Are there any?
More funding coming in. I think that there has to be a longer-term humanitarian solution inside of Somalia, which we are seeing increasing.
Thank you so much for coming in and speaking about this very important issue. Charity Tooze, Senior Communications Officer with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees.